Well, happy Friday, folks. It's been a wild week as per usual. We, had the tariff conversations this week and PBD going off on Poilievre yesterday. It was a lot. There was a lot happening. And this is why this is the video. I promise this is the video that we address Sam Cooper's report about what is happening with these triad groups, what's happening with the cartels, how they're working together, the United Front group, how they're getting into Canada, and how we are not properly addressing it as a country, leading to tariffs. And this is the problem, is we're seeing a lot of conversation and a lot of confusion around tariffs. And part of it is because of lack of focus and a lack of clear communication on behalf of the Trump administration of what is actually the problem. Because he's being ambiguous from a political perspective, to those who are focusing and who understand what's going on, you have an idea of what he's actually getting at. But those who are just trying to live their lives, it's very ambiguous and not very clear of what's going on. Trump says, deal with fentanyl and tariffs will go away. And Trudeau says, well, only 1% of fentanyl is going from Canada to the United States. And we've actually cut down it. And look at what we've actually matched 97% up to the result of last month was. So we're catching more. We're making more arrests. We're doing our due diligence on this. And Trump says, not good enough, leaving the regular person confused. So what do we have here? Well, I want to pull our attention to an Angus Reid report that came out midweek about the feelings of Canada. New data from the nonprofit Angus Reid Institute finds Canadians feeling angry, betrayed, and anxious ahead of the expected implementation of tariffs on Canadian goods entering the United States. Look at the difference. Those are what we call negative emotions towards our neighbors to the south. 3% are happy, 3% are excited, 9% are thoughtful, 10% are indifferent, and then 15% scared, 29% anxious, 37% betrayed, and 55% are angry. And this is a mishmash and a mixture of what we're seeing. We're seeing an issue with our political class gaslighting Canadians, saying, look, we're actually dealing with the problem, even though we know they're not really dealing with it. They're naming people to be fentanyl czars who are at this point seem to be figureheads more than actually doing their job. And then we have the media covering for this government. What we've seen with Rosemary Barton on CBC saying, look, there's actual data out there saying that it's all coming down. Why are these tariffs still happening? Why is Trump giving us a hard time? Yada, yada, yada. And this mixture, in this issue, you put that all into a concoction, you're going to get people in Canada who are over half are very angry with the current situation. Because this is the percentage of Canadians who hold a favorable view of the United States over time. In October, it was 72%. Now, in March, it's 24%. Less than a quarter of our country views the United States favorably. And this is what I say is an info war, because you have the United States saying one thing, you have our Canadian government saying another, we have our media supporting that messaging from our liberal government, and then you have the likes of CNN of the world, where you kind of see their different views, right? You got a nice 668,000 here, 350, we move on, 59,000, 4.1 million for Melanie Jolie, 334,000 views there. And so you start seeing the trend. Is anything Canadian tariff related on CNN is getting elevated views. But the one that just drops the jaw is when you get to Trudeau's press conference addressing tariffs the day they came down at 11 million views on CNN. Americans, at least the left-leaning Americans, are very bought into what is going on with these tariffs. We saw the numbers that the Four Nations Face-Off pulled in. And it was the biggest numbers they've ever done because of the political environment. Yes, Canadians are very invested in these tariffs, but our American counterparts are as well. And as I said to start it off, problem is there's been a lack of clarity, political clarity, from the Trump administration. Even Ben Shapiro, of all people, agree that this needs to end and clarity needs to be brought to the table.
One trade partner of the United States. They are not a financial or economic or physical threat to the United States. Treating them as such is not a wise move. It just isn't. And by the way, it's going to keep Justin Trudeau in power. The reality is that Pierre Poilievre, who's the leader of the Conservative Party and is excellent, a terrific leader, would be amazing Prime Minister of Canada. Pierre Poilievre has been sinking in the polls since the initiation of the trade war because people in Canada are associating Poilievre with Trump, even though he says he doesn't like the tariffs and doesn't like what Trump is doing. So you know what I would like? I would like lower tariffs with Canada. The United States should articulate to Canada what are the concrete steps that they want Canada to actually take to crack down on fentanyl trafficking across the border. We should actually make a significant ask and then get the ask, you get the win, and then ratchet this thing down because it is not good for Canada and it is not good for the United States. And hell, I don't care much about Canada, but I do care about the United States. When you ratchet up prices on everything from oil to cars because of this, that is not going to be particularly good.
So Ben Shapiro laid it out there too, where there's a lack of clarity and concrete steps being communicated by the Trump administration to the Canadian government. And so when this is playing out in public, everyone has their narratives, everyone has their perspective. And so leading to what we have here of the anger Canadians are feeling towards the United States. If this is the messaging they're getting, where it's not seeming clear from the Trump administration what's happening, and then you have Trudeau saying, look at all the things we're doing, look at these data points, blah, 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 blah. The regular person's being like, oh, we are doing something, but they still not good enough. And the regular person's just gonna go back to their daily life and be angry. Versus the people that wanna dig deeper will be like, okay, what is actually happening here? And let's get into it. And that's what I want to make today's video about. What is actually going on? Because those who are paying attention know that the things that Trudeau is pointing to aren't necessarily the actual issues. He's pointing to vanity metrics. He's pointing to just quick wins to hopefully get these tariffs off. Hopefully have that as a win going into the next election. But we know, because the likes of Sam Cooper, Andy Lee, and others who are doing an incredible work uncovering what's happening with the trafficking, fentanyl crisis, and as well the money laundering that's happening here in Canada, we know it goes so much deeper than just putting in $1.3 billion on the border. There's a lot at stake here that we are not currently doing, we are not addressing, and we're pretending like we're addressing it, which is the point I'm making with this. Is yes, Trump has been ambiguous from a political perspective on this, but US intelligence isn't dumb. They know what's going on. They know how close China's gotten to the Liberal Party of Canada. They know how close the United Front is at these fundraisers that the Liberal Party has. They know that likely that current government is very compromised. Our organizations here, CBSA and Cites, are compromised. We have failed to take care of business and national security at the highest levels when it's counted most. It's not just with this issue. There has been others as well. You want to go back all the way back to, I think it was the 80s with the Air India bombing. US intelligence knows this, and that's why the pressure's being put on. But the problem is that's not being communicated in the mainstream. Those who watch shows like this and those who are trying to dig deeper and trying to learn what's going on are the ones who do know. And that's what we're going to talk about today. Sam Cooper's latest article he released yesterday. Trade-based money laundering is the fentanyl crisis. Sources expose Chinese, Mexican, Canadian crime convergence. In this article, he gets into how these organizations work together, move things around. That is far more complex than just, hey, we're gonna get stronger on the border. They use our ports, they use our banks, they use our railways, they use our planes, they use all of our infrastructure to facilitate their illegal activity. And we do very little to stop it. So we're gonna read the first piece of this. Again, you can go read this for yourself. It's a bit of a long read. I pulled out excerpts of it to show kind of the overall point that's happening here. Let's discuss how the cartels and the triad groups have evolved in their work here in Canada. It's going to be a bit of a read, but it's worth the time. According to the primary source, a Canadian expert familiar with what they classify as an intricate trilateral partnership between Chinese triads, the Chinese Communist Party's United Front foreign influence networks, and Latin American cartels, these economic networks have effectively infiltrated multiple industries and commodities markets on Canada's and Mexico's west coasts, using them to conceal and amplify proceeds from fentanyl transactions. In 2023, Canada's financial watchdog FinTrack reported that Chinese networks had evolved beyond traditional casino-based money laundering methods in Vancouver and Toronto, now mastering laundering through Canadian banks, law offices, real estate, and diaspora-based fraud networks. Yet according to the Bureau's criminal intelligence source, these same networks, operating alongside the Sinaloa cartel, also traffic in a range of commodities from poached wildlife and agricultural staples like avocados and limes to rare Chinese delicacies such as geoduck, a phallic-shaped clam prized in hot pot and believed to have aphrodisiac properties. The same source contends that while Canadian government agencies, including the RCMP, FinTrack, CBSA, and Cites, understand the key players in the fentanyl trade, systemic issues within Canadian policing and prosecution allow these networks to operate with near impunity. The RCMP knows they have no framework within the criminal code, no resources, no support from prosecution services. They have no ability. And this whole thing with Trudeau saying that only 43 kilos of fentanyl, less than 1%, is coming from Canada is such a joke. It's the interweaving of trade-based money laundering. If the public knew, it would blow their minds. I believe the US government and Trump know it, and that's why he's doing what he's doing. Put another way, that what this expert and others argue is that the drug and trade wars engulf the United States and China are not polarities. They are a single intertwined conflict with trade-based money laundering as the critical convergence and the growing concern that Canadian and Mexican governments might be benefiting from this illicit trade, perhaps even to the point of complicit, cannot be entirely dismissed. Those are some big statements. So this goes back to the point that America sees what's going on and our Canadian officials are not taking it seriously. So you want to know what's going on with the tariffs. You want to know what's going on between the relationship right now with Canada and the US. That's what's happening, is these crime networks are operating at such a high level that we are not keeping up with them here in Canada. We're not doing our job. We are allowing the Chinese influence, and we're allowing the influence of these organized crime groups to essentially take over our infrastructure here in Canada. And US intelligence knows this. Trump knows this. But it comes back to the issue that we're having, is the lack of clarity we're getting from Trump and his administration is leading to the frustration Canadians are feeling. If there was just more clarity and came out and said, this is exactly what's going on and we want this addressed now, then that puts the pressure on the Trudeau Liberals. But instead, because of the lack of focus and lack of clarity coming from the rhetoric of the president south of the border, has allowed for people like Trudeau and the Liberal Party to just, oh, we just threw money at it and look, we had some arrests. We're doing the job. Take the tariffs off. Oh, you're not taking the tariffs off? Well, you're a bad guy. And that is what has allowed this crazy rhetoric to swirl out of control. To finish off, this is what the experts are saying. The source affirmed that their knowledge aligns with FinTrack's findings on underground banking and diaspora lending, noting that beyond the Chinese migrant community, industry experts have identified similar investment and lending schemes within the Indian diaspora. Meanwhile, several Eastern Canadian police sources familiar with FinTrack's findings on the Chinese diaspora money flows, as well as large-scale vehicle theft and trade-based money laundering investigations, said that they also believe Greater Toronto is a key money laundering and drug transport hub for the Triad cartel nexus, a concern Washington has expressed deep alarm over. One thing that isn't being talked about on this side of the border is the recent activity and the pervasiveness of money laundering and it links to all the criminality, one police source said. Another expert suggests that Greater Toronto could be the largest drug trafficking market by volume in North America, noting that diaspora-based crime groups exert significant influence over all modes of transportation across Ontario, including air traffic. So you have a few hundred more officers driving up and down the border routes now, they said, chuckling derisively. A U.S. government expert criticized Canada's government and media, particularly reporting to the Globe and Mail that echoes Prime Minister Trudeau's seize your data arguments for failing to grasp the scale of fentanyl and illicit trade, calling the country's focus on relatively small seizure data misleading. This expert aligned with Canadian federal enforcement officials who point to highly sophisticated trade-based money laundering schemes linking Mexican cartels and Chinese triad networks operating in Vancouver and Toronto. These networks, the U.S. expert explained, facilitate the cross-border flow of methamphetamine, cocaine, and fentanyl using multi-commodity trade-based money laundering transactions to disguise their profits. They suggest that Canada either lacks a full understanding of the issue or is failing to take U.S. concerns seriously by not adopting a more forthright stance, particularly in assessing the scale of money laundering linked to illicit drugs and organized crime. They believe Canada is ultimately undermining its own interests. Meanwhile, U.S. authorities, they asserted, to have a clear, more comprehensive picture of the problem. So that is the reality that we're faced with. That is what is happening. And I suggest go read that article fully through. It provides a lot of great details on the different findings they've had, the arrests they've made, and the interesting information that has floated to the top and the surface on it. But hopefully that provides a little more clarity of what is happening and why it's such a huge issue and the big problem that it is and the frustration the U.S. is feeling over it. So we'll see what happens with the diplomatic relations between the two countries. We'll see if any clarity comes on any of this. And we'll see. And we need as Canadians to put pressure on the Liberal Party to take this stuff more seriously and acknowledge that, yeah, there's probably a handful of them that are benefiting from this and they know it. So they're playing coy. It's on us to take the information that Sam Cooper has provided us here and highlight it and speak it to the high heavens to continue to put pressure on this political establishment. But have yourselves a good one. Enjoy your Friday. I'm out.